know I'm only on one day a week. I get it. I'm going to have to jump on GarageBand and start sawing something together. This is the House Bar Show. Wow. And a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Hey, Hal, did you mean something like this?
This is the House Bar Show. Wow. And a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's going to be good.
The Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
While they drown your endless torment of, what they do, they have an endless list of propaganda and propaganda methods.
So the analogy that Tucker Carlson has been making about the Ukraine-Russia situation has been repeated multiple times across everyone. It is now the dominant thought form that, this is the dominant lie currently, which is, what would you do if you were Vladimir Putin? If we were the United States, he's the United States in this situation, and we're him, and China put troops on the Mexican border, and how would we feel? We would probably push a bunch of things down. We'd have troops at our border, but right, to defend ourselves against the Mexican onslaught. Okay. They have, when they talk about this, their analogy completely backwards. Because if you're being true to the actual analogy, the true equivalent would be if the United States is, Vladimir Putin's Russia at this current form. That America started talking about how, after the Alamo, parts of northern Mexico were really our territory anyways. And there's a lot of people in Texas and Arizona that speak the same language that they do in northern Mexico. They speak Spanish. Mm-hmm. They have family over there. It's sort of really, we have a porous border. Some people come and go, pretty freely, more than we'd want. But also we have trade back and forth. We have a lot of cultural similarities. You know what I mean? You can get great Mexican food in El Paso, where I was yesterday, or you can get great Mexican food in Mexico. And there's a lot of similarities. And so if the United States started talking about northern Mexico and the annexing of it going, well, it's really our territory anyways. Mexico's kind of ours, isn't it? The Spanish, we beat them in a war, it's really ours. What's the big deal if we want to start flooding northern Mexico with English-speaking thugs who are bilingual, who want to start walking up on everybody going, hey, man, if you were part of Texas, you'd be a lot freer. You could have all the guns you want. We could do all kinds of if we started doing that, and then the UN started sanctioning us, and not China in this situation, somebody actually attached to the issue. But let's say the UK. The UK went, this isn't right. Mexico's a sovereign country now. I don't care what your battle lines were in the 1800s, dummy. You gave up this territory a long time ago. You can't just decide, well, we didn't mean it. We're only going to have to kill about 15,000 people to take it back, and it's kind of ours already, isn't it? If we started joining, then France and the UK and Germany and all these other NATO countries, effectively, let's say there was a NATO treaty in South America because we were known to do this, right? We had a terrible history. So there was a Brazilian, Argentinian, Honduran NATO, and they decided to send troops up or not even sending troops, but sending military hardware to Mexico to park on the border, because we were parking stuff on the border because we did it before. We decided after in the 90s going, fair's fair. We walked away. That's the border. Border's the border. It's going to be the border forever. And then in the early 2000s, we went, you know what? There's actually some parts of of northern Mexico that we could actually use. So you know what? We're just going to take it anyways. We're going to sort of move in. And we've done that. And then we fell back. And then we did it again, and then we fell back. And now we've started amassing more troops than ever, not only in that border, but let's say we put troops in Cuba and stuff off their coast, like Belarus and Crimea, which is what's happening right now. Do you think the rest of the world would be wrong in their assessment of American aggression when I put it in terms that you can understand? Because, right, America's always the bad guy. I get it. In every situation, it's always our fault. It wouldn't have started if we hadn't started it. I get it. So if I put it in those terms, does that make more sense? Because that's what Putin has been doing. Apropos of nothing, he started rolling these troops towards the front. And then when everybody went, "What are you doing?" he started posting pictures of it online. "Hey, check out my troops." And then he started putting similar troops in Belarus, which is to the north, and within a couple of 100 miles of the capital of Kyiv. And then in the annexed part of Crimea that he took over, that island, they started putting in troops there to the south. I mean, it's like a game of Risk. And yet somehow this is NATO and America's fault. Because when Biden became president, they simply weren't ready to hand Ukraine back to Vladimir Putin. Because Ukraine doesn't want to be handed back. And, it's not surprising that, the Sean Hannitys and the Tucker Carlson have a kind of, well, if Ukraine didn't want this, they shouldn't have been dressed that way attitude. It's not surprising at all. And with their concept of what consent means in terms of what can be taken from someone else against their will, and what a strong man's value in the world is, which is, of course, only predicated on what they can take, not what they can give. Of course, Tucker's siding with Russia. Of course he is. RT, the Russia Today, has wall-to-wall Tucker Carlson coverage. And apparently there was a story out this week that they are concerned that he's being so overt in his feelings about, the Russia, that they're just gonna, it's gonna be so obvious the American people are gonna go, wait a second, is he getting a check now? Like, it's starting to creep out even the Republicans who are kind of on his side. Now, credit where credit is due. Tucker is a creep anyways.
I like wood. Deeper and longer.
But this is, no, to each his own.
I'm
not
like
here to
wood.
yuck anybody's yum. I'm not.
Yeah.
But this is a situation of Vladimir Putin's own making. We are not trying to get Ukraine's oil and gas. As a matter of fact, we don't need anything in that country. We don't. I mean, does it serve as a bulwark against Russia's expansion? Yeah. Could that be solved by Russia just enjoying its own borders and building up within them like every other country does? Well, no, because they can't, apparently. Not with Putin in charge anyways. And he, like Trump, is on a hard fade. And he knows this. He's not going to make the economy of Russia better anytime soon. He's not going to improve the lives of the Russian people anytime soon. They're not going to become a world manufacturing powerhouse. They are the Saudi Arabia of the North. And therefore, they have to be run like a royal oligarchy. Because when you are a resource-only country, what option do you have? All your eggs are in one basket. And there is no expectation that anybody's going to be relying on Russian technology to better their lives anytime soon. Not that we couldn't have. Man, they were giving us a run for our money when it came to the space race for a while, right? I mean, they were just basically throwing balls in the air and letting them float around. They were doing a lot of firsts, but not a lot of lasts or a lot of lasting stuff without our help. But they were doing all right, Russian scientists, they're no Operation Paperclip Germans, but they'll do you well If you're trying to put some stuff in space and let it stay there. Why'd that drop off? Because they became an oil country, an oil and gas country. And it's enough for a while until it ain't. The problem with oil and gas as your primary raison d'etre as a country is that once it runs out, the catch up to becoming useful again on a global scale to other countries is a long and fraught one, because vodka and nesting dolls will not make up that shortfall. America has, we for whatever Trump tells you, we do have current energy independence. We buy some oil from other countries because it's cheap, not because we need it. If we had to close our borders entirely again and just run off the oil and gas we produce, we could do it without any new exploration. They can't. Largely because there's nothing to run. 773-763-9278 is our number. It is it's the world news aspect of things right now is fascinating. I don't believe Russia has anything truly to gain in invading Ukraine. There's no benefit to the people, and they feel the same way. The man on the street interviews in Russia are all going the same direction. What for? What are we doing? We all have Ukrainian relatives. You're going to kill people you have a shared heritage with, and we can come and go anyways. It's a conquest. Well, why do you do that unless you're on the losing side of something? Why do you try to seize territory or resources unless you're running out of territory and resources? That's the problem they're in. We'll be back. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. We're on every Saturday. Infotainmentwars.com. Who needs documents?
The House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out at me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at housesparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn puss-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
So, I was poring over, like, I watch so much, like, foreign news on YouTube because that's where they post it the most, and I don't know how in the world you get a cable box that is like the internet. There's just no way to have access to the kind of, like, news sources from, BBC maybe, but, like, Guardian Online stuff and WeOn and the Indian networks and Chinese, CNTV and, like, Korean English language stuff. Like, it's amazing that we live in the era of as much news as we do. And I've been watching a bunch of this, trying to find basically like how the Russian people feel about the idea of invading Ukraine. And, some of them, there's men on the street asking them, hey, are you ready to go to war over this? The same questions you have over here, because, like, let me remind you folks, people are people, so why should it be? You and I should get right? That it's not surprising that a lot of these folks are like, no. Honestly, I'm not, I'd rather not. And by a good measure. Now, are there some when they talk to these folks that say, well, I mean, we're patriots and you have to fight for your country and all that stuff. Like, are they there? Yeah. Yeah, of course. Does that surprise anyone? No. Does it mean that there's enough of those guys, and they are guys, at least in the interviews that I've seen, that are like, yeah, let's do it. Like that there wouldn't be a pushback. Like, there's an idea I also think, and maybe it's the left side of American exceptionalism. America is best kind of idea is that we're the only country where the citizens kind of go, yeah, I don't necessarily think my government's telling me the truth. And we are by no means the only country. There are countries like China and Russia where if you say it on camera, in China you're in danger. In Russia, you could get in trouble if it becomes a pattern, right?
Right.
But and we get to do it so easily that it becomes almost knee-jerk. It becomes habitual. Like, we don't even have to think about it. Yeah, government's terrible at anything. Like, everybody's an instant libertarian the minute they're asked about anything of consequence, unless it's their particular key issue, in which case the government should focus all their issues on one thing. So in this, we have this sort of belief on the liberal, progressive, democratic side of things that somehow in Russia, that the minute Vladimir Putin says war, everybody's like, yeah. And why would we question it? Obviously, we're in the right, and this is something we should do. Well, no. The blowback from them in Afghanistan was long and terrible and had a huge impact on the breakup of the Soviet Union, almost as much as the cost of the Cold War. So bringing that war home and going, okay, that was a waste of time. That was adventurism in the sand and a lot of violence for no purpose. The Russian people reflected on that and seemed to have come to the conclusion that it was terrible and a waste of time. And all the political leaders over there, as much as they can sort of shape the election all they want and keep themselves in power, there's still always a problem of, well, you can only do that within a certain framework, or you'll lose your, you get into a Kazakhstan situation where there's a tipping point where they're only put up with so much crap for so long. And they look at if it can happen in the you look at how after January 6th, people would look at stuff, things like the yellow vest stuff in France or other things and sort of compare it to populist uprisings in other countries. And if it could happen there, it could happen here. Well, when it happened in the United States, that scared the crap out of Russia and Xi Jinping. Because we have amazing capabilities. We just don't use them in a draconian way. But we absolutely, I don't doubt we know the face and phone number of every person who's walked up the steps on January 6th. Mask or no mask, with the capabilities the DOD has. We just have laws that don't allow the use of it. That no matter what the maggots say is being followed. Because anybody who was like, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I know I threw excrement at a police officer and tried to tase him to death, but I regret it, and I will show up for court. Okay, fine. No ankle monitor. Have fun. Go home. But the ones that are still in jail were spitting on guards and going, here's your COVID. Suddenly, those guys are political prisoners, according to the maggots, and are being denied their rights. So this is it should come as no surprise that Russia itself has its own, I don't want to do this, we don't want to do this adventurism into Ukraine. There's no reason for it. And it's starting to rise. One of the reasons why the negotiations are ongoing the way they are is because you have carrot and stick going on. Right now, America is 100% stick, by the way. As much as this is talk about Biden being weak and rolling over in this, we're 100% stick. We put 9,000 troops in Poland and in Lithuania and Germany. By the way, troops that Trump took out and we just sent back, by the way, because Trump took those out because they wouldn't be there to shore up NATO forces in case Russia wanted to roll into Ukraine. You do recognize that the Trump's removal of troops was a tacit salute to Putin and yeah, do your worst, knock yourself out. So we just put those pieces back on the board effectively in terms of the chess game. We didn't add any, but we're threatening sanctions and they will follow through on them. The United States is going to have horrifying sanctions. And if you think Putin doesn't mind or he doesn't care, he has a way around it, ask the Iranian leaders what it's like to be isolated in your own country and unable to, spend all your offshore funds. It matters, and it will matter. And it turns out that this week, France and Germany are are now acting as the carrot. Germany being the primary, and everybody's like, well, Germany's breaking away and they're playing footsie with Russia because they need the oil and gas. And so therefore they only send helmets and da-da-da. No. NATO's allied. There's not a problem. This is all show. And I'm telling you, France and Germany are playing the carrot part. They're not going to give anything. They're not going to give Ukraine to Russia or any of that stuff. They're not going to agree that NATO never will ask and sign a paper saying that wouldn't be legally binding anyways. And if Russia started invading other places, would be torn up in an afternoon. Why would you agree to some sort of Chamberlain agreement with Russia, especially after everybody knows how the Chamberlain agreement went with Germany? Okay, you can have a little bit of Czechoslovakia, but just, you promise to stop there? Okay, well, as long as you don't attack us, you can have as much of that poor other country and their people and their resources as you want. There's that old Carlin bit where he's talking about, here's a line you never hear in a movie: do what you want to the girl, but leave me alone. Right? And that, right? And that's basically, yeah, that's what Chamberlain effectively did. Do what you want to Czechoslovakia, but leave us out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody buys, and there's a huge difference between Putin and Hitler on a lot of fronts, especially strategically, which are the only ones that matter, because he's a murderous a-hole anyways, but he's much more personal. I don't know that, Hitler ever personally murdered anyone. I'm fairly certain that Putin has, right? Person to person.
And the KGB, probably.
No, yeah, when he was in the KGB, yeah. And he certainly has ordered it personally. Whereas, Hitler famously tried to stiff arm his own involvement in this and just kind of winked and nodded and let his 12 chancellors put together the final solution, so he wouldn't get his fingers dirty, because he saw himself as king of the world. So he was trying to basically offshore. He's basically Charles Manson in that regard. You guys, I'll tell you the awful, you go do it, but I didn't tell you to go do it. I just told you to solve the question, right? Putin, on the other hand, is definitely snuffed people. Like, there's no question, So, on that front, you're dealing with someone strategically who thinks in those terms and may have a more tethered to reality view of the cost of doing it. Soldiers tend to view it, more realistically when they've worked their way up to being a general than legacy hires or, people who've been put into positions of military strength, right? Coup leaders and the people like that who sit back and smoke cigars while the soldiers do all the dying. They have a different view of it than somebody who was a soldier and came up through it. And so Putin, maybe finding his practicality, has painted himself into a corner for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we got 2 weeks left of ground freezing over in Ukraine before it gets mushy. So that's why everybody's building up right now, to make that window as painful as possible. And then when the ground starts to thaw, the tanks have to go over mushy ground. It makes it way harder. And we're in a different negotiation point. He knows that. We know that. That's where we are. And again, it's, to quote Eddie Izzard, Hitler never played Risk as a kid. Put them all on Papua New Guinea and build them up and build them up and build them up, right? That's effectively the point we're in right now. But not because America asked for it. Sorry, Tucker. Sorry. We're not. We would be Mexico reclaiming Texas in this circumstance, not the other way around. In the analogy for it to work. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Park Radio program, Mega Worldwide. We're on every Saturday on WCPT 820 and WCPT820.com is a great website. All your favorite talkers. Also, sexyliberal.com, because I'm on the Sexy Liberal Podcasting Network. They carve this show up into usable chunks, which I think is God's work. Bless your heart, Chris Lavoie. We'll be back.